The top stories: National Army said to be Ethiopia's lifeline. And diplomat urges Ethiopians to bolster unity in the face of foreign meddling. Hello and thank you for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour. With the news, I'm Tabitha John. Do stay with us. Minister of Defense expressed confidence that the Ethiopian army is currently in a good shape to deter any aggression from any direction. The minister, Abraham Belai, made remarks during the celebration of the annual Defense Day, marked here today with assortments. Presenting a paper for a panel discussion at the event, a seasoned historian, Abubao Ayaleo, indicated the establishment of the Ethiopian army has direct link to the state formation. Daniel Kasahun has the details.
The Ethiopian Defense Force, which consists mainly the ground and the air force, is well known in the African continent and the world at large due to its track record in the continent and across the world with peacekeeping missions. The National Defense Forces Day is being marked by undergoing various activities that include panel discussion and opening exhibitions, among others. Expressing its current status, the Minister of Defense, Dr. Abraham Belai, expressed confidence that the Ethiopian army is currently in a good shape to deter any aggression from any direction.
ጀግና ጠንካራ ዲሲፕሊን የተከበረ ወታደር ያላት ሀገር ነች።
Now we are creating efficient and unique feature of the Ethiopian army with strict leadership and discipline. Our enemies will not get a chance to attack us since we are now many steps ahead of them. We are well equipped. Now we have the required human power, organizational structure, skills and capabilities. We need to maintain this status in a better manner.
Presenting paper for discussion, Assistant Professor Abayalo indicated the establishment of the Ethiopian army has direct link to the establishment of Ethiopia as a country.
ታሪክ የሚያስተምሩ ተቋማትም መከላከያም ራሱ እነዚህም በደንብ አድርገው
The history of the Ethiopian army is directly linked with the formation of Ethiopia and its formal government. The origins and military traditions date back to the earliest history of Ethiopia. A nation and a government can't exist without realization of an army. We need to pay attention to the military force. When we remember the Battle of Adwa, it was history and a making due to the engagement of Ethiopian troops.
This year's celebration has seen launch of a book entitled Ring of Fire, which depicts the real picture of the Ethiopian army. The celebration has brought together former President of Ethiopia and other dignitaries to uphold its outstanding deeds for Ethiopia's sovereignty, peace, stability, and territorial integrity.
Ethiopia's extraordinary and plenipotentiary ambassador to the Islamic Republic of Pakistan says the conflict in the north was sparked by the TPLF's unquenchable thirst for power. While Ethiopia and Ethiopians demand equality, the TPLF, the ambassador pointed out, wanted to control all of the resources of the country. The remark came when the ambassador spoke to the PTV World, a Pakistani mainstream media. Guya Hinsenni has the following account.
Human rights and international law are being used as instruments to unduly intervene in other countries' international affairs, according to the ambassador. The West has failed to grasp the reality in Ethiopia, he said, adding that TPLF want to recapture federal power and restore its undeserved monopoly.
Look, thank you very much for raising this basic issue. What is the major problem Ethiopia we have? Previously TPLF, the Tigray Liberation Front, which was, they are ruling Ethiopia close to 30 years. Through controlling the military, economy, cultural supremacy. Change comes in 1960, in 2060, where people, like intellectuals, come on guys, we are now in a civilized, we believe in equality, let us share equal power. That is where came the reformist, within our country comes. That reformist has ensured changes that is, driven within the party,
True.
plus again owned by the people. That is where the marriage of convenience came. The people take, TPLF, enough is enough. Now let us live in peace.
True.
This is what we're promoting. But the TPLF, they resisted this. They wanted that supremacy. But Ethiopian people says, take your share. Let us share what we have. Manage your own affair in Tigray. And the central politics, let us share equally. They said, we can't, no. We will not. So our Prime Minister has led this change. He has did a fundamental changes addressed in Ethiopia, which was deep-rooted that.
True.
The political issues. Look, people like me previously were outside the political context. He brought us on front. And let's say we own Ethiopians, belongs to all Ethiopians,
True.
and let us work together for the prosperity, the unity of Ethiopia. That is where it is. The policy he designed, basically we have a clear vision where we are heading. We use something we learned from history, something that is around us, so we're connecting history with the future.
Regarding the assistance he delivered to more than 8,000 flood-affected people in the 10th city of Sindh, Bakar said climate resistance is a just call to the international community for a cleaner and safer environment.
Minister and Foreign Minister, he was addressing General Assembly of this year in September. He said, we need to call for, transformations and availability of finance for climate resilience.
True.
This is one thing, the only way that justice will come. We are not requesting help us.
True.
This is the compensation, as you said. They have did, to advance their, national interest, they destroyed the planet, all we share.
True.
We need to recover. This planet has to be restored. Resilience should be there. We're requesting the finance that required to rebuild this country. Also help, others. Pakistan is a good example where it has suffered. It became a basketball for climate, fiasco.
Over 33 million people have been affected in 116 of the country's 160 districts. Over 993,000 homes, 157 bridges, and over 3,500 kilometers of roads have been damaged, and over 700,000 livestock have been lost. Ambassador Bakar handed over essential food items, medicines, shelters, water, biscuit and toys to more than 8,000 flood-affected people in the 10th city of Sindh. He underscored that Ethiopia stands in solidarity with the government of Pakistan and will continue to help it recover.
Pakistani ambassador to Ethiopia says Ethiopia is a sovereign, independent, founding member of the UN with all rights and international obligations. Talking to ETV here today, he said this ancient nation should be left alone to handle its problems by itself. The ambassador reaffirmed his government's commitment to stand by Ethiopia in this just cause. Kazaun Chane has this report.
Since the start of the TPLF provoked war in the northern part of the country, Ethiopians residing at home and abroad have been playing a significant role in fending off the unprecedented interesting growth, pressure and interference. Since the dawn of history, some foreign entities have been walking around the clock, intending to undermine the nation's sovereignty under the pretense of a wide spectrum of lame reasons that do not reflect the existing situations on the ground. Ethiopia has every right to undermine the destiny of its people in the battle against poverty and neo-colonialism. The country has repeatedly demonstrated that it stands for peace and development, but would never accept any level of negative portrayal by any foreign entities. As the Pakistani ambassador to Ethiopia, Shahzad Abbas, his government would never accept undue interference in the domestic affairs of Ethiopia, and express his firm belief in Ethiopia's capacity to solve its problems through its initiative as a sovereign country.
All sovereign nations, developed or developing, both have been facing various types of pressures from inside and outside. So these two issues, one is the ethnic issue of your country, which needs to be reviewed from another angle. And I think that the Constitution of Ethiopia, although gives ample opportunity to each federating unit to work according to their own aspirations, but the territorial integrity is the fundamental question. So if anybody is going for the separation, then he has to follow the Constitution. Or if you want that the people should come together. I think that is the best way out.
The ambassador reaffirmed that Pakistani will always stand in support of Ethiopia's solidarity for peace, stability, security, and territorial integrity and development, but noted that Ethiopians do not have a tradition of bowing to foreign forces, and history is a witness to this fact.
I believe that sovereignty is the most endeared question to any independent nation. Ethiopia is proud of its independence, is proud of its history. It has never been colonized by any colonizer in the world. So I would say that sovereignty and territorial integrity are the two questions which are most important. And no country, and especially a country like Ethiopia, would sacrifice its independence. So all pressures which are coming from here and there are just pressures in air. I believe that the resilience and the force in Ethiopian people would not accept it. So you should proud of your tradition, you should proud of your culture and heritage, that your country has never been succumbed to such pressures. And I hope that all these pressures which are mounting up against question of Ethiopian sovereignty would not be entertained by the people of Ethiopia.
He further underscored that the freedom of Africa should be respected, that they can solve problems in Africa by themselves, appreciating Ethiopia's move for an everlasting peace process led by the AU.
And the African Union, under the leadership of former Nigerian President Obasanjo, has been working quite along. And I heard that today the meeting is going on in South Africa. So I hope with this flexible timetable and format and location, the government of Ethiopia, with its adversaries in this particular issue, would be able to find out a compromised solution where the life and property of the Ethiopian people would be protected.
Ethiopians have spoken loud and clear that their sovereignty and territorial integrity is not for sale or the subject of any form of concession. The people of Tigray are Ethiopians and are both being treated as such, while the terrorist TPLF is the enemy of both the Tigray people and Ethiopians in general, and any foreign force that allies itself with this terrorist force should know this.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs today called on the United Nations for inclusive, fair, effective, and representative multilateralism to better respond to humanity's most pressing challenges. In a statement it issued today, the ministry recalled that as a founding member of the United Nations, Ethiopia has remained committed to the principles of the United Nations Charter, saying that the nation has demonstrated its contribution to global peace and collective security. The statement went on to say that Ethiopian men and women have continued to play a robust role from the early days of UN peacekeeping missions in the 1950s. Ethiopia is proud and privileged to have hosted the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa for over 60 years, it added. Ethiopia, while celebrating multilateralism anchored on the UN Charter and its cardinal principles, calls for a reformed, efficient, and viable United Nations fit for purpose in the 21st century, according to the statement. Ethiopia's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations, Taye Atqassilase, gave briefings on latest developments in Ethiopia in the past days. During his briefing, Atqassilase underlined the commitment of the government of Ethiopia to the protection of civilians and delivery of humanitarian assistance to people in need in northern parts of the country. He called on Council members to avoid steps that may cast doubt on the AU-led peace process. Regarding the defensive measures taken by the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, Ambassador Taye underscored that the government security forces have the right to station and operate from any part of the country, including Tigray. Ethiopia is always committed to the AU-led peace process, Ambassador Taye noted, calling Council members to support the efforts underway to resolve the conflict in the north peacefully.
እንኳን ደህና መጣችሁ። ማጎ ብሔራዊ ፓርክ በጣም በተፈጥሮ ጸጋ ውብ የሆነችና በተራሮች የተከበበች መሃላ እንዲሁም ታንዛኒያ ግሮንጎሮ የምትባል የኢኮሎጂ ጥበቃ ቦታን የምትመስል ነው መሃላ። ይሄ ውስጥ በዚህ ብሔራዊ ፓርክ ውስጥ እንግዲህ በኢትዮጵያ ካሉት አንጋፋ የተባለ ከፍተኛ ገቢ የሚሰበስብ እስከ 2.4 ሚሊዮን በአመት ገቢ የሚሰበስብ የቱሪስት መስህብ ዙሪያው በባህላዊ የታጀበ ማህበረሰብን ያቀፈ ነው።
ሰባ1 ዓመት አካባቢ ወደ 81 አካባቢ አጥቢ የዱር እንስሳት ዝርያዎች ነበሩ። ከነዛ ውስጥ ትላልቅ አጥቢ የዱር እንስሳት የሚባሉት ጎሽ፣ ዝሆን፣ ዲፋርሳ፣ ሌላ እነዚህ ስጋ በል የሆኑት አንበሳ፣ ነብር የመሳሰሉት አሉ። አሁን ላይ ከነዚህ ውስጥ የተወሰነ የዱር እንስሳት ዝርያዎች በተለያየ ምክንያት ከዚህ ከብሔራዊ ፓርኩ ጠፍተዋል።
While Ethiopians and Friends of Ethiopia are standing in unison in denouncing undue foreign meddling in internal affairs, a journalist says these initiatives help in pressuring the West towards fairness. Talking to ETV, Danish journalist Rasmus Sonderis called upon Western journalists to report on Ethiopian stories in an accurate and fair manner. Daniel Kasahon takes us through the remainder of the story. Take a look.
Ethiopians and Friends of Ethiopia are denouncing some Western countries' interventions across the globe concerning the conflict with the TPLF. Talking to ETV, Danish journalist Rasmus Sonderis said rallies staging across the globe are key to change mindsets of the West with positive messages.
So I participated in one of those rallies last November in Copenhagen. And I find that when we speak to the Western public, we can change minds with positive messaging, like support our democracy, respect our constitutional order, let our own newly independent human rights organizations do their work, free Tigray from the TPLF. Those kind of messages work very well.
Regarding Western interferences on Ethiopia, the journalist said some individuals who are close to TPLF may need the group to come to power. Otherwise, the rest, including the United States, are beginning to realize the chaos TPLF caused and unpopular extremism in both sides. But the problem is the wrong diagnosis they have what this conflict is about.
I think the US is finally beginning to realize that all they're gaining from this both sidism is becoming extremely unpopular. They're not even popular with the TPLF, right? They've just become unpopular all over the Horn of Africa. And I think also the Western diplomats, when they spend time in Ethiopia, they talk to a lot of Ethiopians, they start to take on the Ethiopian perspective. So because Western governments, they don't want 120 million refugees, they want stability. Almost all people see themselves as good. I've worked a lot in development aid. They may be misguided in many ways, but they don't want Ethiopians to suffer. They want progress, democracy, human rights. The same thing as the Ethiopians that are my friends, the same Western ideals that Ethiopians share with most Westerners. So the problem is they have a wrong diagnosis of what this conflict is about. They're seeing it through a prejudiced lens, the infamous toxic white savior complex, that makes them think they're morally superior.
The journalist finally calls on Western reporters to cover issues on the ground about Ethiopia.
I would say, take a fresher look at Ethiopia and Africa, instead of always assuming the worst, instead of the same lazy comparison with Rwanda. Immerse yourself into the Ethiopian society if you have the possibility. Nowadays, you can even use Google Translate to read local newspapers. Nobody does that.
Right.
And do not assume that these self-proclaimed experts are neutral. People like Kjetil Tronvoll, Martin Plo, Alex de Waal, who've stood ready to meet the demand for media sensationalism, and they have, boosted the false TPLF narrative about the dictatorial old guard being somehow representatives of an oppressed minority. But they've been wrong again and again in all their predictions. Like 1 year ago, Alex de Waal was predicting the breakup of Ethiopia, becoming like a loose confederation. Now he's predicting state failure. And all I have to say about this is I think it's very unlikely that Ethiopia will break up and have state failure. But if that were to happen, the Western powers would have a lot of blame.
Cuba and Africa share a very good relationship, and actually the involvement of Cuba in Africa.
As I told you, Africa is perceived as one of our own.
What can Africa learn from Cuba's experience?
Our sample was very bad for the superpowers because what happened is all the countries decide to take their own destiny in their hands.
What does Cuba stand to gain from that?
Yeah, I will arrive to that. So it's a service that we offer to different countries.
Cuba stands out in, and that is medical diplomacy.
We are very proud, and we are very faithful to our friends.
In business news, Djibouti expresses desire to import wheat from Ethiopia. The two countries have strong cooperation in the leadership level, people-to-people and economic as well as regional and international forums. Djiboutian Minister of Agriculture, Water, Fisheries, Livestock and Marine Resources, Mohamed Ahmed Awaleh, noted that Djibouti will be the first buyer when Ethiopia starts exporting wheat to the foreign market. Tigist Nisa presents the following piece by the Ethiopian News Agency.
The two countries have been extensively promoting regional integration through the Ethio-Djibouti Railway, renewable energy infrastructure, road and import-export trade. Djibouti's Minister of Agriculture, Water, Fisheries, Livestock and Marine Resources, Mohamed Ahmed Awaleh, told the Ethiopian News Agency that Ethiopia has a major role in facilitating fruit production and clean drinking water supply for Djibouti in the agricultural sector. He also mentioned that recently Ethiopia has donated saplings of food and forestry to Djibouti as part of its Green Legacy initiative with a view to ensuring food security and tackle climate change.
We congratulate for the Ethiopia for the giving us this particularly this partnership. Ethiopia is my brother. If they produce wheat and they want to export, the first country to export is Djibouti, and we purchase in order to take from other countries. Ethiopia, if they produce wheat, we give the priority to purchase it. For the future, we may create a program for the future, interbordery and agriculture, and Ethiopia will be part of it. I am very glad for the future.
He further noted that the two countries will work to strengthen the relationship between the two countries, especially in cross-border agricultural development.
Ethiopia is my brother. If they produce wheat and they want to export, the first country to export is Djibouti, and we purchase in order to take from other countries. Ethiopia, if they produce wheat, we give the priority to purchase it. For the future, we may create a program for the future, interbordery and agriculture, and Ethiopia will be part of it. I am very glad for the future.
Ethiopia is carrying out various activities to create regional economic integration and realize a strong environment. The country is doing successful work in semi-irrigated wheat cultivation so that the region can overcome the food insecurity challenges and get rid of aid dependency.
And finally, from across Africa, Black South Africans are starting to smash the barriers in the country's renowned wine industry. Winemaking was a profession most South African parents could never have envisioned for their children. But Black South Africans are today managing to break through multiple barriers into the renowned industry, transforming a landscape that was historically white. Guya Hinsani has the rest of the story from African.